Well, did you realize that it's possible to grow vegetables 10 months out of the year in Oklahoma, and possibly even year-round with a few modifications? And of course, these modifications are products like this, which we call cold frames. Now here at our studio gardens, we have one that is a kit that we've had probably about 5 years, and it's held up quite well for us. And then one of the new ones that we introduced this year was our greenhouse umbrella. And the smaller size fit pretty well here in our raised bed, and we'll be planting some lettuce and spinach under that just in a few days. The other half of our raised bed, though, will be using one of our designs that Alan came up with, where he's basically used some rebar that he's pressed down on the inside, and this is just some old irrigation pipe that we found here on some of the research plots. And it makes a nice little frame. Of course, it's not as sturdy as some of them, but if you put the proper spacing when you use your plastic, it will hold up. And then we just use some boards along the side to mount that down. So we'll be planting some of our broccoli and other cool season crops here. But the design has worked for us practically all winter long because we've used it over around our garden deck where we've got some of our pansies. And so that plastic has held up pretty well, and we've pulled some of our pansies and violas through the early cold winter too. Well, recently we visited with some other Oklahoma gardeners about some of their unique cold frame designs and also growing characteristics. We're at the home of Mr. and Mrs. James Harden of Newalla, Oklahoma, and that's just southeast of Oklahoma City. Now, from all of the raised beds, you can tell that Mr. Harden is definitely an expert at raised bed gardening. And Mr. Harden, welcome to Oklahoma Garden.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about how you develop these raised beds.
Well, we start off, when I first come in here, this ground was just solid red. It was just red clay, sand rock. And I just take these preferably use treated 2x12s to put down, and I spaded it up and put gypsum down to break up the sand rock, and then you use a regular 1/2-inch hardware cloth to go over that.
And that's for what purpose? The hardware cloth?
The hardware cloth is to just keep out your rodents.
You have a lot of problems with gophers getting in your raised bed.
Right, gophers.
Right. Now I noticed you're in a low area, so obviously the raised beds help in the drainage, but you're telling me that the soil is the most important part of your gardening. And why is that important?
Well, you have to improve the soil from year to year.
Okay.
My soil, I start off improving the soil the minute I plant it.
Okay.
Not for this year, but for next year.
Okay. So that's real important advice, isn't it? Now, Mr. Harden, you're an organic gardener.
Right.
And what is your philosophy behind that? Why did you start with organic gardening?
Well, my uncle used to tell me tales about when they come to Oklahoma, a guy could ride through the cornfield and you couldn't see the man on the horse. And I stopped and thought about that, and I said, well, man's got to be doing something wrong. There's a better way to do it, so we're going to have to stop and look back to see where what we're doing that's wrong, that we can't do that nowadays.
So you don't use any chemicals, you work on your soil, and of course you use tried and true varieties, some that are older that you like too.
Right.
Okay. Well, let's walk up here and see the soil, some of your finished product here. And that definitely will do a great job of gardening. That's a nice, loose, sandy soil. Years of work, you tell me.
Well, this is what's left from last year's mulch, is what that amounts to. That's last year's. When I planted last year, here's what we have to plant in this year.
And that's from your mulch that you use alfalfa hay or straw. Okay. Now, you start real early with your gardening. Tell us what you use here and about your cold frame.
This is a 6x6 reinforcement wire that I take, and if I'll bend the ends down on it here so it won't punch a hole in the plastic. And I'll just take a chicken wire staple and go across, after it's planted, put it across the bed. And then with these ends, I'll bend them down, you see, so the plastic, and this plastic, I get this stuff everywhere.
Right. Now these are actually your tomato cages that you're getting some usage out of for your frames here, which You've got the plastic over. Now you've got onions growing in these, and the plastic that you're getting already has holes in them, and that's a good thing in this case because you don't remove your plastic every day on a sunny day like this. The heat comes up through the plastic.
Right.
Well, that's a good idea, Mr. Harden. And let's walk up here and see some of the other gadgets that you've developed.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Harden, you tell me you have about 800 square foot of raised beds, and you've developed several things to make your gardening go a little bit easier because, as you told me, you don't like to spend a lot of time out here pulling weeds and stuff, even though you really enjoy it. What have you got here that you use to plant? What kind of device is that?
This is just a piece of 1x6, and it's got 1/2-inch dowels that I've bored down, and they stick out a 1/2 inch.
Uh-huh.
Now this one is particular for onions because I plant on 4-foot centers. Each plant has a different spacing.
Uh-huh.
Like sweet corn and the like, you go 6-inch spacing.
And these are
peppers,
4-inch spacing.
And these is 4-inch.
Okay.
This is for onions, is what this
Okay.
one's for.
And then show us how you use that.
Well, you rake your bed down smooth. Now, this bed is 3 foot across, and this here is just a little less than 3 foot. So you just put it in the ground and rock it a little. And you got the holes there then.
Okay.
That you can drop 1 seed per hole and kneel down here and take your fingers and cover them just like that.
Now, you planted your onions last fall, and they're growing in this raised bed right over here all winter long.
Right.
But here we are taping this segment today, the first week of February, and you tell me you're getting ready to plant today sweet corn. Now, you probably have the first sweet corn in the state of Oklahoma, but this is a little device you use to pre-sprout your corn. How do you use this?
This is an old a grape that grapes come in.
Uh-huh.
I take this and just put a little dirt in here, just enough to hold the moisture. The same dirt that you're going to plant on is fine, just enough to get moisture, to hold that moisture. You put this kernels in here, put as much corn as you want, put the lid on it, and then you can get a hobby shop. These lights sell for about $5. They got a little old Christmas tree bulb. It's about so big. And just stick it down in one of these holes and place this in the greenhouse and turn it on. You can germinate this corn. Instead of 4 days, you can do it in 2.
Okay, so you got a nice environment with lots of warmth to get the corn planted. Now back here are the beds you're going to plant them in. So you tell me as soon as the corn root starts to come out, the tip shows, you take it and then you transplant it here.
Right.
Now, you've also covered it up ahead of time. Why did you do that, James?
I warmed the ground up.
Uh-huh.
This has been covered for a week. Now that
Okay.
ground, the weeds is already starting to grow. That's another thing that you get into. When you cover the ground like this time of the year, the weeds will sprout.
Right.
Okay?
So that's telling you your temperature is warm enough to start growing some of the corn. So the whole purpose of that was to warm the soil up prior to planting the corn, and you've even pre-sprouted it. So when will you be harvesting ears of corn?
Sometime in June.
Sometime in June.
About
Okay.
65 days from now.
Okay. Well, James, you've got a lot of great ideas here that you've shared with us, and we want to thank you for inviting us out. And I want to mention, too, that James had an article in Organic Gardening last year that talked about these processes. So, James, good luck to you, and thanks again for all those good tips.
Nice.
Kathy White is an Oklahoma gardener who believes in making cold frames work for her 365 days a year. She has even written about her successes in several gardening publications over the years and gave us an overview of her construction and planting techniques.
It's a 4 by 12 foot cold frame, and it's basically made from 3/4 inch plywood. The doors are made with 1 inch pieces of redwood. We treated the plywood with copernol. It's a copper substance that's safe for plants. Inside we use 1 inch styrofoam sheets and cut it to the dimensions of the box to line the inside. We've got 6 inches of it about buried in the ground at the front and back for insulation. and we have it facing the south, and the slope is at a 35-degree towards the south, which is draws more sun during the colder months in winter.
To regulate the temperature inside the coal frames, Kathy uses a device called a thermophore, which automatically raises and lowers the lids to adjust to outside conditions.
The thermophore automatically adjusts ventilation according to the temperature. You can set it anywhere between 55 and 85 degrees, where you can start it to be an opening. And you can use it like in the winter if you're growing like cool weather crops, to open it 60 degrees, 55. And for later in the spring, when you plant like warm season crops, you can set it to open 75. Early in the fall, say September, just as soon as the weather cools down, then I plant it with things like spinach and lettuce and any type of leafy greens, and broccoli as well. And they mature pretty much by the end of November. And they'll hold over through winter. You know, they won't do a lot of regrowth during the really cold part of the winter. And you can harvest from them up through February or March. Then I replant, and I usually add some lettuces, tomatoes for early crop of tomatoes, peppers, and then a little bit later, say around the 1st of March, middle of March, I plant like cucumbers, melons, and the really warm season crops. About the end of May, whenever it starts to really get warm, or whenever, you know, our temperatures warm up for those plants, or when they start to bloom, then I take the doors off and I put cages in, tomato cages, and let the vines climb.
Well, we want to thank James, Kathy, and the various manufacturers for sharing those innovative ideas with us. And you know, it really does drive home the fact that Oklahoma gardeners can grow delicious produce practically year-round. Well, before we leave you today, I want to remind you, if you're going to be grafting pecans, don't forget now is a time to either purchase or collect that graft wood, and that information can be picked up at your county extension office. Well, that's all the time we've got today, and we hope you'll join us next week here on Oklahoma Gardening.